Let's spend a little time on issues relating to testing for the virus. Problems with testing availability, accuracy, readout times have significantly contributed to the spread of the virus. Clearly, if someone has to wait 8 to 10 days to get the results of a highly accurate COVID-19 test like PCR, the test is useless. On the other hand, some antibody tests give quick readouts, but they also can give pretty high amounts of false positives and false negatives. Given these facts, what is the best strategy we should use for testing?
When I think about testing, Dennis, I think about, well, first of all, companies are really developing and individuals are developing an incredible area of testing. And I think, if you look at the FDA website, I do every day, there's EUA authorizations for new tests almost every, 3 or 5 every week of different tests for COVID. Number one is that, there's a lot of tests out there, so it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. But I think about testing as diagnostic testing and surveillance testing, right? When I have somebody who's sick and I need to test them, they come to the clinic, they're not feeling well, I need to test them. I need a test like a PCR. I need a test that can give me a lot of accuracy and I can make a diagnosis. But when I think about surveillance, and I think about surveillance, for example, kids are returning to Emory and we need to test them all. Or people are going to return to an office and they want to test everybody. Then PCR, the diagnostic test, may not be the test we want. We can use a test that has lower sensitivity, but it's cheaper and a rapid turnaround. So there, an antigen test may be better. Something like you can do a rapid test, that you can do an antigen test, not a PCR. And yes, it will give you some false negatives, but it also give you some false positives. But the false positives, you then go ahead and do a PCR to confirm, right? But the false negatives, if you test frequent enough, you're going to take care of the false negative issue. And then the antibody test still needs to find its niche. And, the antibody test, a lot of these tests don't become positive until about 10 to 14 days after infection. So they offer an opportunity to do surveillance testing for sure. If I want to be out in the community and see, okay, what percentage of people in Decatur have been infected, I can do a study and find that out. But it's not going to be something that I can use for diagnosis unless somebody comes to the hospital, comes to the clinic, let's say 2 weeks after infection. And maybe I'm seeing somebody in the ICU with ARDS and very sick and intubated, and I do a respiratory swab for PCR and they're negative because the virus is no longer there. Now they have a lot of the immune response to the virus that is causing them to be sick. That's somebody I will test an antibody test, because if the antibody test is positive, I'm going to say, okay, this is probably a consequence of COVID-19, but it doesn't have a lot of use in routine diagnostic testing at this point in time. I do think that in the future, there are going to be tests. There's a test that FDA approved recently called the Binax Now, produced by Abbott. And there's going to be other tests like that one that are lateral flow tests that are point of care that can be done outside the lab. Abbott said that the Binax Now is going to be available for $5 a test that you could potentially do at home, right? And just, as you're let's suppose you're having 30 guests come to your house, you can just test everybody, here's your little test, and before you come into the party, just test yourself. And I think that's going to be part of what happens in the future as we think about using the test in a more effective way.